Tracking down people who talk. That's the message from Seymour Hersh, the journalist behind the bombshell Nord Stream blast investigation, which concluded that the U.S. was behind the attacks in September. Earlier, RT's Marina Kosorova explained how Hersh is now standing strong to protect his sources despite overwhelming media pressure.
I think what the newspapers, particularly the German newspaper, are very nasty to me, and the New York Times and the Washington Post just ignore me. I think what they want to what they think I should do is, use his name and get him put in jail. It's amazing to me that how they fall in line, my colleagues. They didn't do it when I was at the New York Times. They didn't do that. The one thing the government's good at is tracking down people who talk.
Seymour Hersh was very nonchalant in this podcast interview, and he said that this is something that was out there all along and that it wasn't very hard to find. And all you had to do was a little bit of digging, and he did just that, which is how he found his source. And once again, with direct operational knowledge into how the U.S. did it, how it planned these attacks, and how it got rid of Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, the pipelines. And he says that even though we're making a big deal out of this, he says, yes, it is a big deal, but in terms of finding out the information, all you had to do was search for it. It was out there. And now, of course, he's under a lot of pressure to reveal his source. He even jokes at one point saying that this is his first and perhaps his last interview since writing that article, because he doesn't know what will happen and if perhaps there will be some pressure on him. We've seen radio silence, no pun intended, regarding headlines from mainstream media. There has been barely anything. And when we do see mainstream media talking about the revelations in that bombshell article that he wrote, we're seeing it twisted in a way. Russia wants answers now regarding America's involvement in blowing up the pipelines. And again, this is not Russia wanting answers. It should be the world wants answers. The world needs to know what happened. Or, for example, in one of the articles, they say once celebrated journalist Seymour Hersh, in a way trying to defame him. But let's see what Seymour Hersh himself had to say regarding who the source was.
It's not even a hard story to understand. The President of the United States and the Undersecretary of State both said they were going to do it, and they did it. There's something called the pipeline industry. There's an industry that makes American companies involved. They build pipelines around the world. Are you listening to me?
Yes.
They know what happened.
Seymour Hersh there, of course, talking about the fact that Joe Biden spoke about it openly, Victoria Nuland spoke about it openly, the pipelines, getting rid of them if need be, and that's why he's saying, and they did just that. And regarding, he gave us a little hint about the pipeline industries, and also in that interview, he says it doesn't necessarily, his source, doesn't necessarily have to be American. Let's not forget that NATO countries were involved, and that even energy companies knew that this was being planned. They just couldn't talk about it.
Marina, you know about Nord Stream. I know about Nord Stream. We've been hearing about it for years, covering it here for years. But many people don't really know the full story, the background. Can you tell us a little bit more about the background of the Nord Stream projects and the revelations and how they've been handled since they've come out?
Of course, so the Nord Stream gas pipelines were used to deliver cheap Russian gas to Germany and to Europe in general. And Germany was receiving a substantial amount. Now, Nord Stream 2, which was finally completed, was going to double the amount of cheap Russian gas flowing to Germany and, of course, to Europe. And America apparently wanted to put an end to it, and they needed to get rid of those pipelines. So, as early as 2021, Joe Biden authorized his national security advisor to come up with a team and find a way to weaken Russia, to defeat Putin, as is mentioned in that article. And what happened was that Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, put together a team that involved the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the CIA, the State and Treasury departments. They had lots of top secret meetings right next to the White House, and these are some of the details that Seymour Hersh mentions in the article. That's what makes us think that this source is legitimate, because there are some things there that you wouldn't find unless you know that this is someone, as he says, with direct knowledge of the operational planning. So, top secret meetings, and they find a way to do it. So, U.S. Navy divers are to be used, but when and how do you do it? Norway gives them the idea. Hey, you can do it during the annual NATO drills that we have every June. So, U.S. Navy divers supposedly go down under and put the